Hey, this is Habiter. Today we're going to learn how to make an escape room from scratch. And to do that, we're going to start by clicking this button here. We're going to go ahead and click on New World in the top right. Then we're going to select a blank world and give it a name. We're just going to call it Our First Escape Room. So when we load in, we'll notice that we're not in build mode yet. And if we look around, it's going to be a totally blank gray grid. If you take a look at your right hand and pull back on the right joystick, you'll be in creator mode. You'll see each hand has menus attached to it. We'll go over what they are over the course of this video. If you take a look at your left hand, you'll see a little walking person. Go ahead and press up on the left joystick to respawn back into preview mode. Let's hop back into creator mode. And you'll find that if you use the grips on your controllers, you can actually pull yourself through the world. For me, it sometimes helps to think as moving the world itself and maybe not so much myself. If we hold both grips at the same time and move them together or move them apart, we can zoom in and out. We can also, if we hold them at the same distance, rotate the world in different directions. If you look here, we can see that there's a little blue person. This is our spawn point. So when we spawn in, you can see that this is where we are, right in the center of the grid. If instead of just pushing up on our joystick, we push and hold, you can see that we get a little laser. And when we release, wherever we point is where we spawn. You can see that I'm now much closer to the edge than I was. We're going to use the little hand icon on our right hand to select an object like our spawn point. And then when we click and hold with our trigger, we can move it around. You can also move by using the grips while you're holding objects. Now when we spawn, we're right on the edge of the map. So let's move ourselves back to safety for now, and we're going to go ahead and press the hamburger menu button on our left controller to bring up the build menu. You can hold down on the hamburger menu button and the menu will follow your hand. You can also grab the build menu like an object to make it bigger or smaller, rotate it, move it around, or place it wherever is comfortable for you. To build an object, simply grab it out of the build menu. You can see that there are some little arrows on the sides of our cube. By selecting the object with both triggers, we can scale it up or down. And if we hold onto the object with only one hand, we're moving it around. Then, if we grab those arrows by hovering over them and selecting them with the trigger, we can move the object along that axis. You can see that we do it to the side. You'll also notice that there are little squares, and those allow us to stretch an object. Let's start off by making a floor. Once we've got that built, you can see that it's a little difficult to get the floor level with the ground, which can be disorienting for people walking on it. But I'm going to go ahead and use my left joystick to select the icon that looks like a magnet. This is the snap tool. And what that does for us is it allows us to make objects snap on an invisible grid. You can see that the object has these additional orange dots. We can grab the object by these dots. The next build menu feature we're going to look at is style. Go ahead and open up the menu, and now we're going to select the little paintbrush button right at the bottom. That's going to open up our style menu, and Horizon provides a few different palettes, but you can also make your own color by using the manual color slider. You can then select the object and paint it. We can also change the material. So if we wanted to have a more metallic look, we could select it and apply it. Or if we wanted to make our object glow, we would select the glow option and apply it. Now I'm going to show you some configuration options. But first we're going to duplicate this cube by using the duplicate tool. And we do that by moving our right joystick to the right. And we're going to use this to make 3 cubes. I'll give them some color so that we can tell them apart. Before we get into configuration, let's talk about grouping objects. If we hold down the select button, we can go ahead and grab all 3 objects by dragging our cursor through them. And as you can see that I can move and rotate them as if they were one object. When I hover my cursor over these objects, I can press my right joystick to the left to group them as a single object. Now that they're grouped, even if I unselect them, they're going to stay as one object. To ungroup these objects, you do the exact same thing. Just hover your cursor over the grouped object and push your joystick to the left. Now I can select them individually and move them around. So let's get into configuration. I'm going to hover my cursor over the object and press up on my right joystick where we see the 3 dots. That's going to bring up our configuration menu. I'm going to get this open for all 3 objects. We're going to look at 3 different types of configuration: visibility, collidability, and the interactive option. So with the first object, our red cube here, we're going to go ahead and turn off visibility. This will make it a transparent cube. It no longer appears to be red. On our blue cube, we'll turn off collidability. And on our third cube, we're going to go ahead and set the green cube to interactive. It's going to default to grabbable, but we're not going to change that for now. So now when we go into our world to test, the red cube is missing. We don't even see the outline, but if we try to run past it, it is still there as an invisible wall, unlike the blue cube, which I can run right through. The green cube, I can reach out and just pick up and move around. All right, now, before we get started on creating our actual escape room, there's one last thing I want to show you. You'll see that in build mode, now that I've moved the green cube around, that it is no longer in its original position. And this can make it difficult when you're designing a room, trying to remember where everything goes. So we're going to go ahead and open up our build menu, and we're going to go to the scripting section. Now, we're not actually going to script anything, but we are going to go into that menu. And if you look at the top right, you'll see a play, stop, and reset button, and that's the one that looks like a little U-turn. All we're going to do is select the reset button, and that'll reset our world, and now our green cube is back where it belongs. All right. Now that we have the basics down, we're going to go ahead and start building our first room here. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the theory behind designing an escape room. So we're going to start with what may sound like a silly question, but the answer is going to help provide a foundation for how we approach our design later on. All right, what is an escape room? Well, it's a room. More specifically, a room from which you're trying to escape. In this episode's demonstration, we're going to take the concept of a room literally, but this can be anything that you can think of. So a room in the context of escape rooms is simply a confining space from which a player must escape. You could be trying to escape an elevator, a cemetery, the inevitability of mortality, a circus, whatever. You can escape anything you can imagine. The bottom line is that for our purposes, the player starts at point A and needs to get to point B. So we have our room. It's pretty straightforward. I like to differentiate the floors and walls with different colors, as it makes it easier for me to see what's going on while I'm building. Later on, we'll talk more about style and aesthetic design of a room. But for now, we're just going to focus on mechanics, so I'm going to keep it simple. Okay, so our room's got a single exit, and the walls are tall enough that a player can't jump in or out. They have to exit through the exit. So is this an escape room? Probably not. Escape rooms aren't just rooms you walk out of. They have to have some sort of obstacle preventing an escape. There's no barrier to exit, so I can just walk out. To make this really an escape room, we're going to have to put something in between us and the exit. First thing I'm going to do is fill in this gap with a block. I'm actually going to turn that block into a door, which is going to prevent our exit. Even though this is just a demo, I'm still going to take the time to make our door actually look like a door. Not only am I going to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and paint it while I'm at it. You may have spotted this earlier, but there is actually a texture option beneath the color palettes. And for our door, we're going to go with a nice wooden material so that our door looks like a door. You can see that because I have the knob selected, it's only going to allow me to paint the doorknob. So if you ever have a lot of objects close together, it can be helpful to select them individually while you're painting them. This may seem like a lot of effort for just our basic demo, but I would argue that making the door look like a door, having a knob that looks like a knob, having the wood grain is really is one of the most important parts of our puzzle, because without it, players aren't going to really know what they need to be doing. A door is a call to action. When you see a door, you know that you're supposed to go through it. Next, I'm going to open up the attribute panel, select interactive. That way our players can grab the door to get past it. Do we have an escape room yet? Well, I would say the answer is still no. I know that I've been dragging this point out, but I really believe that it's critical to understand how I'm getting to this definition so that when we are doing our designs later, we can apply it to make good escape room design. The third piece of the puzzle, no pun intended, is that the challenges obfuscate the goal. So in full, when I'm talking about the escape room, what I really mean is that escape rooms are a confined space in which players must overcome obstacles in order to discover how to exit. And I'm going to clarify that further by saying just because a player knows where the exit is does not necessarily mean they know how to exit. For example, if the exit is a door with a lock, the goal is to leave through the door. The puzzle is finding the key. In Horizon, getting the door to open with a key is going to take a little bit of scripting. So we're just going to stick to using grabbable objects for now. But it is something that we'll touch on in the next episode. The payoff of a puzzle is the satisfaction of figuring out the answer. If you don't know that the puzzle exists, you can't experience the payoff. With that in mind, it makes sense that a single door in a room a puzzle does not make. Our room has both a confining space from which the player must escape, as well as an obstacle preventing exit. We still needed to meet our third requirement, which is obfuscating the exit. So you can see, as I've been talking, I've been putting the finishing touches on our first puzzle. I went ahead and duplicated our door and placed one on each of the four walls of our room. Now that the doors are set up, let's give it a test. There is an immediate call to action. I'm in a room full of doors, and doors are meant to be opened. When I go to the door, all I find behind it is a wall. Now it immediately becomes clear what the puzzle is. Some doors are fake, and presumably at least one is not. The challenge is finding the right door. I like this puzzle because it tells players what to do without telling them what to do. By revealing the puzzle in this way, I'm attempting to subvert the expectations of the player, as well as give them something to discover by not putting up a sign that says, "Try and find the door isn't fake." This gives players a second thing to discover. First the puzzle itself, and then the way out. When a player spawns into the room, their first instinct is going to be to open the door in front of them. We don't want them to get it on the first try, or at least hopefully not. So as a final touch, I'm just going to go ahead and turn their spawn point around. This is a great first step to creating our escape room. But before we move on, I'm going to take a look at a few simple puzzles we're going to be using. I'm setting up a small test course. We're going to look at different ways of crossing from the red platform to the green platform. While we have the platforms at ground level, the players can simply walk across. Let's add a sense of danger by moving the platforms up a bit. You may have heard of the term jumping puzzle before, but if not, essentially it's a physical puzzle that requires players to make jumps via an unclear path, or that are simply difficult to make. If you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out Merck's Mountain. The entire world is an elaborate jumping puzzle. I'll post a link to the world below the video. So to demonstrate, I'm going to show you the jumping puzzle in its most basic form. I honestly don't think that we can call it a puzzle, but at the very least it forces me to jump across. Let's think back to our 3 cubes and the configuration features. We learned visibility, collision, and interactivity. We've already used the interactivity feature with our grabbable doors, so let's move on to visibility and collidability. So we're going to use visibility and collision when we implement our next 2 puzzles. Just like before, I'm going to use the configuration menu to make our center cube invisible. The player doesn't know the platform is there, but if they take a leap of faith, they can still get across. We'll come back to this again. But first, let's get over to the 3 bridges that I set up over here. This time, we're going to configure 2 of our paths so that they are not collidable. When I test the first bridge, I fall through as expected. Same with the second bridge, and then if I walk on the third, I'm able to walk right across. Even though these are just demos of what we can do, I'm going to take it a step further. It's important to play fair when you're designing an escape room. Right now, our puzzles don't have any sort of indication as to what the player should be doing or that something isn't quite as it seems. Let's return to our invisible platform example. I'm going to open up the build menu, but this time I'm going to select the Gizmos tab up at the top. Then I'm going to give you a heart attack by grabbing the script gizmo, realize my mistake, and grab the text gizmo instead. So now that I've got the correct block, I'm going to go into the configuration menu and select the text field. We're going to keep it simple and just type in jump here. I'll place it above the invisible platform and voila, our puzzle has a call to action. Next, I'm going to differentiate the bridges by making them different colors. I'll add some text shortly, but sometimes floating letters are difficult to read. I'm going to go ahead and build a sign. We'll center our text and we'll use the style tool to paint it black so that it stands out. I could just tell the player which bridge is correct, but that's pretty uninteresting. Instead, I'm going to use a puzzle that I'm pretty sure you're already familiar with, a riddle. Riddles are one of the most difficult puzzles to implement well in an escape room because it's impossible to judge how long it's going to take somebody to solve it, or even if they're going to be able to solve it at all. A good rule of thumb is that if a riddle is difficult, it should be optional. And that if a riddle is mandatory, the players should be able to brute force the solution without taking too much time. For example, the riddle I came up with is, what is a book after you've finished it? The answer being read. If the players solve the riddle and are capable of walking in a straight line, they'll be able to get across on the first try. If they don't get it right away, there are only 3 bridges, and it's easy enough for them to test each bridge. They're still able to continue without having solved the riddle. Now we're going to put it all together. I'm first going to duplicate our door puzzle. I'm going to expand it to make some space outside of our first room, put a roof on the top, and make the walls tall enough that the players can't fall out of the world. I'm locking all the walls and floors so that I don't accidentally grab them while I'm building. Because this is our first escape room, I'm going to stick to only having 3 puzzles for now. The puzzles are going to be linear, which means they are going to be solved one at a time from start to finish. The first puzzle is our door room, so let's jump straight into our second puzzle. I've made 2 poles in the middle of the room, and I'm adding platforms to each of them. The idea is that the players will have to jump back and forth until they reach the roof of our little house. I highly recommend jumping in and out of preview mode to test as you're building. It's a lot easier to tweak things in the moment than come back later and have to remember what you were trying to accomplish. For the second half of our jumping puzzle, I'm going to introduce another feature. In the configuration menu, just to the left of the interactive option that we used earlier is an option called animated. Once we've selected animated, we get a few additional options. I'm going to start by selecting record, and then I'm going to slowly move my platform up and down. I'll select stop and tell the animation to loop. When I hit play, the platform is going to move exactly as it had when I recorded the animation. This is an incredibly powerful tool that can bring a lot of life to your world without any scripting at all. One last thing. I forgot to do this when I originally built the room, but you'll want to make sure to scroll to the bottom and make sure you set your animation to play when the world starts. Otherwise, it'll never start moving. I made the moving platform the second half of our jumping puzzle because it's going to draw the eye of the player and it's going to give them somewhere that they'll want to go. For our last puzzle, I'm going to use both the visibility and collision mechanics. I've made a 4x4 grid of platforms. I've already made 4 of them invisible, and those are going to be the platforms the player has to jump to get across. I want to turn off collision for the rest of the platforms. I can do this by selecting all of my platforms at once, opening the configuration menu for the group, and toggling the collidable option. Remember to test often. Thankfully, the platforms are working the way I want them to on the first try. Okay, we finished our 3 puzzles. I'm going to wrap up making some minor tweaks and changes before giving the room a test run all the way through. I'm creating more space on the other side of my platforms, and I'm using a couple of text gizmos to add a hint to the room as well as let the players know when they've gotten to the finish line. Even though I've already tested all of my puzzles individually, I still want to make sure that they're all working together as expected. I'm not running into any problems in this run-through, but it's still a good habit to develop. I've decided my platforms are clouds, and my riddle's going to be a simple one. Don't step on the clouds. Even though I'm not explicitly telling the players what they should do, it's easy enough for them to jump to the right conclusion. Jump. Just like that, we're finished. Yes, I can hardly believe in such a short time we've created not just an escape room, but the ugliest escape room that has ever existed. We're going to have to fix that. So we've learned how to mechanically design an escape room, but if all escape rooms looked the way that mine does right now, I don't think that anybody would actually ever play them. For this video, I intentionally stuck to simple objects while I built the room so that I could focus on showing how the puzzles worked without getting caught up in making it look nice. When I'm initially planning a world, it doesn't matter if I think of a puzzle first or a theme. Either way, I don't actually start building the world until I've decided on the theme. You'll see why in a moment. For this world, I decided to go with the jungle theme. I'm going to paint everything except for the doors, which are already painted, and honestly, replace most of the things I've already built. This is why I try to make sure I know the theme going into it. Even if I don't put in a lot of detail, I can still save myself a lot of time by making the objects at least kind of look like the way they're going to look at the end. The aesthetic design of your worlds has a bigger impact on your puzzles than you might expect. When we designed the door, for example, we talked about using good design to give instructions by showing and not telling. Conversely, bad designs can break your puzzles. About halfway through building the roof on our hut, I realized that not having a flat roof was giving away the correct door because it was showing a gap. I had to go back and readjust my thatch so that it wasn't clearly visible. Another example of why constant testing is so important. Most platforms don't naturally float up and down on their own, so I added some poles at the corners of our animated block. Now it's an elevator. The poles we used for our platforming puzzle are naturally going to be replaced by trees. I make the leaves by snapping together two flattened pyramids, and since I know that I'm going to be using more than one of these, grouping them into a single object is going to save me some time. I also use the leaves for the tops of the trees. I don't want them to interfere with any players jumping, so I'm going to make sure to turn off collision for these next. I make our clouds actually look like clouds, kind of, and here I make two mistakes. Number one, forgetting to make the initial cloud non-collidable, immediately forgetting that I could set properties en masse like we just learned 2 minutes ago. Our elevator can't go nowhere, so I've built an observation deck. The hint is just floating in the sky for now, but I think I'm going to make it into a sign. Our last piece is the finish line. I'm going to get really creative here and make it a giant rock. As always, let's test the room. Wow, huge difference. As an artist, I'm more of a Picasso, but even the simple aesthetics that I've created add depth to the world. The puzzles aren't just there in a vacuum, there's a story being told. Let's see if the escape room we made follows the guidelines we outlined earlier. Our players must get from point A, which is inside our hut, to point B, at the top of the cliff. When the players begin the escape room, where they need to go is not immediately apparent. It's hidden by the puzzles. And once they do know where to go, they still have to cross the clouds to get there. Our puzzles have a clear call to action, they play fair, and our riddle is simple enough that either players will solve it right away or by trial and error. The world is thematic, and the objects in it have purpose. By taking what we've learned, mixed with a little creativity, you have all the tools you need to get started building worlds in Horizon. And if scripting isn't for you, you're still going to be able to create amazing puzzle worlds. In the second half of this build, I'm going to teach you how to use what I call one-step scripting to elevate this world in a way that really takes advantage of VR as a medium. Thanks for watching. This has been Habitar, and until next time, I'll find my way out.